we fought through the fourth quarter. We fought, we clawed back. I thought we were going to be able to get them in overtime, and honestly, more than anything, shout out to our fans. Fans were amazing. They're a huge reason of why we were able to get back in this game, but yeah, it was definitely nice to see some go in. Wish would have helped us get a W a little bit more.
Caitlin Clark dropped 32 points, 7 threes, and 8 assists last night, and the Indiana Fever still lost. Not because she failed, not because the Mystics were just better, but because Stephanie White pulled Clark during the hottest stretch of her game, then had her inbound the ball in the final seconds of overtime, instead of letting the best shooter on the floor take the shot. A 58-point paint differential and getting out-rebounded 44-29, back-to-back home losses, and a front office that spent the offseason ignoring the one problem everyone could see coming. We're breaking down the coaching malpractice that led to Caitlin Clark's MVP game against the Washington Mystics being ruined. Comment down below what you think needs to change, because this roster has real talent and right now it's getting wasted on losses. Caitlin Clark had no business being on the wrong side of.
It's great, but I don't really care because we lost.
The first quarter of this game looked genuinely good. Indiana came out moving the ball, Clark was finding open looks from deep, and every single starter scored early on. 6 of 7 from 3 in the first 7 minutes. The Fever pushed out to a 13-point lead and Washington looked uncomfortable, which is exactly what Indiana needs against a team that wants to slow things down and pound the paint. So when it's working, you need to keep your foot on the gas.
Billings, another offensive rebound. She's been really active. Clark backing up and dropping a three. Putting on the moves. Amor sticks with her. Clark. Bullseye!
Then the second quarter started and Washington went on a 25-7 run. Not a slow bleed where you look up and realize the lead's gone. A full collapse that happened so fast Indiana barely got a timeout in before Washington flipped the whole game and went up by double digits. The Fever went from a team that looked like it was going to win comfortably to a team that was chasing the score before halftime even arrived. And that shift is worth really sitting with because it didn't happen by accident.
It's been that kind of night after the first quarter for Indiana. Citron, a step through.
Heel as she goes. It's blood in the water. 0.
The Mystics have gone up double digits.
Washington didn't suddenly start raining threes. They attacked the paint, drew fouls, and got to the free throw line over and over while the Indiana's half-court defense turned into a foul festival that killed the Fever's transition pace completely. The game slowed down to Washington's tempo, and the Fever had no answer for it, because they weren't built to handle what Washington started throwing at them once the first unit got off the floor.
She felt like they were over-dribbling. They need to be a little bit more mindful of where their shooters are, and also defensively. Steph White has been saying it all game.
McMahon drives by Clark. If it hangs and finishes. 3 accounts here today. Austin now 5 of 6 from the line, but Citron pulls down the offensive rebound. Iriafin going right back to work.
Kiki Iriafin and Shakira Austin were catching the ball in deep post position on almost every half-court set, and the backup front-court pieces Indiana threw at them couldn't hold ground. Aaliyah Boston is legitimately one of the best two-way players in the league, but she's one person, and the drop-off behind her on this roster is steep enough that the moment Washington targeted the second unit, the paint opened up like a highway. Stephanie White kept running bench combinations that looked reasonable in theory, but couldn't physically stop what Washington was doing down low.
Iriafin on Billings. Iriafin spins, fires, and the bank shot goes down. Themselves, players just kind of collide off of them. I'm not sure if that's what happened there or not, as Iriafin strokes a 3. Drives on Citron. Clark up and under, blocked by Iriafin.
Clark was still on the floor for parts of that run, working to get the offense going, but it didn't matter because Washington was converting at such a high rate in the paint that Indiana's perimeter scoring couldn't keep pace with those kinds of easy looks.
We have not seen Aaliyah Boston here in a little bit. Clark thought about the 3, circles around, fires away, and hits! Will it be Mitchell? Will it be Clark? Cunningham looking, versatile talent, handoff Clark for the tie, yes! Caitlin Clark has tied the game with under 2 seconds left to play.
The 13-point lead actually made this worse, not better, because Indiana didn't come out flat and let the game get away from them slowly. The Fever built something real in that first quarter. 6 of 7 from 3, every starter contributing, Washington on their heels, and then watched all of it disappear in about 8 minutes because the defensive structure behind Boston couldn't hold when Washington decided to test it directly. Now, before you put all of this on Stephanie White, and there's plenty to put on her, you have to look at what she was actually working with. Because the roster Indiana's front office built going into 2026 had a hole in the front court that anybody paying attention could see coming, and nobody did anything about it.
Monique, they had 58 points in the paint, start of overtime, Washington scoring down there over and over again. What did you feel like were the struggles you guys had protecting the cup tonight?
Just executing our coverages at times. Our communication wasn't always there. And again, they just made really tough shots sometimes. There were bodies there, and they just made really, really tough shots. Great players in the post.
Aaliyah Boston is genuinely one of the best front court players in the WNBA. She can guard post players, she rebounds, she runs the pick and roll with Clark better than anyone else on this team. And when she's healthy and on the floor, Indiana's defensive picture looks completely different from what it looked like in that second quarter collapse. Boston is the reason the Fever can even compete against post-heavy teams like Washington, so when she left in the third quarter with a lower leg injury, the whole defensive structure of the team walked off the floor with her. And it's worth noting she was already on a minutes restriction, only playing 21 minutes before she went out, which means she probably wasn't fully healthy before the game even tipped off. So Washington's post players were already testing a front court that was running thin, and the moment Boston sat down, those looks got even cleaner. Monique Billings and Myisha Hines-Allen stepped up and put in real minutes trying to cover the gap, and you can't blame either of them for not being Boston. But the front office's job was to make sure that gap wasn't so wide that one injury flipped the entire defensive math of the game.
I mean, we're getting great looks. We still shot 40% from the field, but we missed way too many bunnies around the rim. We talked about it at halftime. Probably should have talked about it after the game, but should never shoot 39% from the field and 40% from 3. At the end of the day, it's gonna be really hard to win basketball games. But we still scored 102 points, so it all comes back to our defense and the way we're able to defend. But hey, we fought through the fourth quarter. We clawed back.
The free agency decisions this past offseason left Indiana without a real second rim protector. So when Boston went down, White had to pick between undersized lineups that could move laterally and bigger lineups that couldn't contest the angles Washington kept creating in the paint. Neither option worked because neither option was actually built to stop what Washington was doing. A 58-28 paint differential doesn't come from your guards having a rough night. That number means Washington's post players were catching the ball in good position and finishing without real resistance, possession after possession, for most of 4 quarters and overtime. That's a roster problem. Indiana got out-rebounded 44-29. And that's not just about height, it's about physicality and positioning. And it traces straight back to the bodies the front office chose not to bring in when the need for them was obvious.
Yeah, I think shots did start falling, and I think we've been letting that dictate how well we play defense too much, which is disappointing for us as a group. We got to be able to defend all the time. So I think that's our biggest area of growth is everyone wants to guard when they're making shots. And for us, that's our biggest room for improvement right now is when things aren't going well, we still got to be able to defend and, find ways to get stops. And we haven't done that very well to this point, the same way it was with our opening game. So opportunity for us to improve in that area.
Clark can't guard a post player, and that's not a knock on her. It's just what her position is. So every time Washington ran a post action and Indiana's bigs couldn't stop the catch or the finish, Clark stood on the perimeter watching points go up on the other side of the floor with nothing she could do about it. The Fever scored 102 points and still lost, and that number alone tells you exactly where this game broke down. Clark was down in the fourth quarter, Washington had the lead, and the game looked like it was done. Then she just started cooking. Fading threes from the logo, contested pull-ups and drives when Washington's defenders started cheating off her on the perimeter. And the Fever went from a team that looked finished to a team that was right back in the game because one player decided she wasn't going home with a loss. So while Clark was in the middle of that run, while Washington was scrambling and Indiana's crowd was alive again, Stephanie White pulled her. Not because Clark picked up a foul, not because she looked tired. White made a rotation call that took the hottest player in the building off the floor, and Indiana's offense went completely flat the moment Clark sat down. This isn't a one-time thing either. White has a pattern of pulling Clark during momentum stretches to run some lineup combination she thinks works better on paper, and it keeps producing the same result. The Fever lose whatever Clark built and have to climb all over again.
Caitlin, how tough is it for you mentally to kind of grind through those first 3 quarters when you're struggling and still keep chucking away to be ready for that fourth quarter?
That's like the hardest thing as a basketball player is when you're not making shots to really stay in it. So I was certainly proud of myself. Really, really battled. And a lot of those shots are very, very makeable. And I finished really well around the rim and 2-point area to start the season. Today I didn't finish well in the 2-point area. Like obviously 7 for 17 from 3. Obviously I got a lot up with how the game was played out, but happy with the way I shot it from 3. From 2, I need to focus around the rim a little bit better.
Clark came back, kept hitting, and literally forced overtime by herself, which tells you exactly what that benching cost Indiana. It didn't just kill the momentum. It cost the Fever time they needed to build a lead big enough to actually win in regulation. So Clark spent the whole fourth quarter recovering ground she'd already covered once. Overtime didn't get better. Clark kept fighting and kept creating, but Kelsey Mitchell started forcing isolation shots on possessions that should have gone through Clark, and White never adjusted the play calling to run the ball through the player who'd just dragged the team back from the dead. Mitchell missed a wide-open layup that would have given Indiana the lead. Mitchell's a real player, and she's been good for this team, but hero ball in overtime is a system failure before it's a player failure. Because a coaching staff that can't establish who takes the big shots in late-game situations is setting their players up to freelance when the game is on the line.
As I said earlier, all of us need to do that, but it starts with me. And, if we don't have 3 clunky quarters, we don't force ourselves into basketball heroics. Like, we don't want to play that way. Like, I know it's exciting for the crowd, but we should have had ourselves in a position, especially after the first quarter, to, control this ball game, and we really didn't.
And then came the inbound play. Final seconds, the Fever needing a basket, and Clark was standing out of bounds throwing the ball in. Not catching it, not shooting it, inbounding it. White drew up that play deliberately, which means she looked at her roster, looked at the situation, and decided that somebody else on that floor was a better option to take that shot than the player who just hit multiple 3s in a row under pressure. That's not a mistake. That's a coaching decision, and fans calling it malpractice aren't wrong. After the final buzzer, Clark told reporters, "I think we've been letting shots falling dictate how well we play defense too much, which is disappointing for us as a group." She's talking about the team, but she's describing a standard that the coaching staff hasn't held all season. Clark is 24 years old. She's in the middle of her prime. And before this game even tipped off, the league honored her for becoming the fastest player in WNBA history to reach 1,000 career points, 250 assists, and 250 rebounds, doing it in 54 games and breaking Diana Taurasi's record of 62. She then went out and dropped 32 points and 8 assists in the same night. That's not a player who needs to figure anything out. That's a player waiting for the organization around her to catch up. Boston coming back healthy is where the path forward actually starts, because when she's on the floor, Washington doesn't get 58 paint points. She's the one player on this roster who can guard post players, hold position on the glass, and run the pick and roll with Clark without the whole defensive structure falling apart. The Fever's 1-2 record and back-to-back home losses don't tell the full story of what this team looks like with Boston healthy for 30-plus minutes. And that's not an excuse, it's just the math. Lexi Hull matters here too because Hull gives Indiana a wing defender who can guard multiple positions and take real defensive pressure off Clark on the perimeter. And if she keeps developing in that role, the Fever have a two-way piece that actually fits what this team needs on both ends. But none of that fixes the front court depth problem the front office built this offseason. And if Indiana wants to compete for a championship in 2026, they need a real rim protector behind Boston. Someone who can hold the paint when Boston rests, or when teams like Washington decide to run post actions for 48 straight minutes. That player doesn't exist on this roster right now, and the front office knew that when free agency closed. Stephanie White is a harder conversation, She's shown real flashes of building something with this group, and there are stretches where the Fever look exactly like the team Clark deserves to play on. But pulling Clark during her hottest stretch in the fourth quarter, designing an inbound play where Clark throws the ball in instead of catches it, and then failing to run the offense through Clark in overtime when she just carried the team back from the dead, those aren't small adjustments. Those are decisions that directly cost Indiana a win. Clark's 32.73 night isn't a sign that the Fever are close. It's a sign that Clark is already operating at a level where the team's ceiling is getting set by everyone around her, not by anything she's doing wrong. This was Indiana's second game this season scoring over 100 points and losing. And that number sits there like a warning that nobody in the front office seems ready to actually answer. Clark scored 32 points, hit 7 threes, and dragged the Fever into overtime by herself. And Indiana still lost because Washington out-rebounded them 44-29 and scored 58 more paint points than the Fever did. That's not bad luck. That's a structural problem that starts with the front office, ignoring the front court in free agency and runs straight through White's late-game decisions that kept making Clark's job harder. Comment down below what you think needs to change, because this roster has real talent and right now it's getting wasted on losses Caitlin Clark had no business being on the wrong side of. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on all notifications so you don't miss out on all the WNBA news. Click the video on the screen and we will see you in the next one.